Well, no, I'm really not, because again, I don't really do traditional tax return work. I might be called in by a corporation to review their corporate tax return, their corporate federal and state tax returns, and to that extent, I may be impacted by tax return deadlines. But the typical tax return deadline, everybody thinks, oh, 4/15, you're crazy busy. I'm really not impacted by that. But I am impacted by deadlines, and my deadlines are really client driven, project driven. It's if I tell a client that I'm going to have something done for them by a specific date, that's my deadline. That's what I'm working towards. Give them the deliverable, give them what I promised them by the deadline that they need it by. Some of the work that I do, is also deadline driven by mergers and acquisitions. I do a lot of work in helping companies determine whether there is exposure when a company is going to be acquired. It's called due diligence, and a lot of times these deals, they got to be done by a certain date, so certainly there are deadlines associated with that. Now, here's a funny thing. People will say, oh, you're a CPA, you must be good with numbers. As my kids will tell you, I am not good at math. Okay, everyday math, typical math. Certainly, I passed my CPA exam, don't get me wrong, and I am an accountant, and I know debits and credits, and I know those very well. But when it comes to really being a kind of, quote, numbers kind of person, that's really not my cup of tea. And which kind of leads me to the next bullet point here, the next section. What I do really is much more loyally. What I do really deals with analyzing the state tax laws and reading the state statutes, reading the state regulations, reading court decisions, looking at guidance that a state might put out on a particular issue. I spend an inordinate amount of my time. I was thinking about it. I was thinking probably about 80 to 90% of my time is really spent knee deep in the law, reading about the law, analyzing the law, trying to determine how the law applies to my client situation, writing technical memorandums, explaining to my client, here is what the law says about your particular situation. But more importantly than just getting buried in all of the legalese, what I really do is I advise my clients on how the state tax laws impact their business and give them my opinion of what course of action to take. And in that respect, I really am a trusted business advisor. The thing about being a CPA and how this all ties into what I do, being a CPA is imperative to what I do. Understanding business, understanding my client's business, understanding the challenges that they're up against. It's not enough to just know the law, read the law, analyze the law. What is equally important is to really be able to take that law and apply it to my particular client situation. And I think the accounting degree, being a CPA and doing what I do, they tie in so incredibly well together. As a matter of fact, it's funny because one of the statements I like to make to my clients, several of my clients have heard me make this statement at one point or another, and that's that there's a legal answer and there's a practical answer. One thing I heard from a client not too long ago is they called me in to do some work, and they said, we had some attorneys that prepared this report 3-4 years ago, but it's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and they didn't tell us how to really implement this stuff. And that's one thing that I really try to do. Again, it's not just about analyzing law, it's really about understanding the business and really helping my client to implement whatever it is that they need to implement, to understand whatever it is that they need to understand. I mentioned a minute ago that I have a blog and I happen to write, and I'm also at the same time now talking about, I spend an inordinate amount of time analyzing law and writing about it. So you think, well, gosh, she must, get tired of doing this stuff. I don't. I love to write. I love to analyze the law. I love to write. I love to articulate it. I love to explain it to other folks. So I am absolutely very much doing what I love to do. I mentioned a minute ago, I've been in this career for 20 years, and as Rita mentioned, I've not had a board day in my life. When I literally am the kind of person that jumps out of bed. Okay, maybe I don't exactly jump, but the point is that I'm excited about my day. I'm excited about what I'm going to work on that day. I'm excited about what I'm going to write about that day. And that is just so absolutely key. Here's another quick story. I was talking about sort of all the legalese and stuff, and this is the point I want to make on this next statement is really that again, being a CPA, it's just such an invaluable, an accounting degree. Being a CPA is so incredibly invaluable in so many different ways. I remember one time a few years back, I was in a meeting with a client, with an attorney colleague of mine, and the client starts talking about all of this accounting jargon. And this legalist he was completely lost. And once again, it's just so important to really be able to, understand a person's business, understand the financial impact of something that you're advising them on. So once again, in that respect, getting an accounting degree is invaluable. I mean, you can do so many things with that degree. And again, I'm a CPA, not a numbers person. I'm not impacted by tax return deadlines, maybe to a very small degree, but for the most part, I'm not. And I don't know everything there is about taxes. So don't ask me a personal income tax question. But when it comes to corporate state business tax questions, that is my forte, and that's what I love doing, and that's where I can answer questions. With that final note there, just looking at the time here, I'm now going to turn it over to Robert. One last slide. Have any more questions about being a tax consultant or other advice on embarking on an accounting career? My contact information. I love hearing from younger folks. I really do. I'll just say this very quickly. I've had a few younger folks whom I did not know, approach me on LinkedIn. I really admire a young person who can do that. And that's probably one bit of advice that I'm going to throw out right now is don't be afraid to ask other people to mentor you, to contact other folks who are already in this profession. You would be surprised how often they are more than willing to help you out. So on that note, I will now turn it over to Robert.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. This is Rita again. I'm going to take a moment here to let all of you look at this next slide and look at the introduction, or listen to the introduction that I'm going to give about Robert Raiola. And he is with a public accounting firm in New Jersey. And we are actually very lucky because of all the weather to have Robert with us today. We are pleased he was able to make it. Robert he's another very unique CPA, and his unique specialty is sports and entertainment, and he's the sports and entertainment group manager at the New Jersey firm FMRTL. I'll use the shorter version. He has over 20 years of experience in both the public and private sector. He provides business management services, tax planning, and consulting to high net worth individuals and their families in the sports and entertainment industry. I again wanted to mention his Twitter handle, Sports Taxman. I hope some of you students will check that out. I'm sure it will pique your interest. I did check it out, Robert, and found it fascinating to read down through your prior tweets. And he's very active on Twitter, and I'm sure he'll probably share how that has helped expand his practice. Robert's a graduate of Pace University, and also he co-authored the AICPA book, Winning Tax Strategies for Athletes and Entertainers. So we're very pleased to welcome Robert Raiola. Robert?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. I just wanted to reach out and thank Lisa, thank Jeff, thank my co-panel Sylvia. Like Sylvia, I share the enthusiasm for the accounting profession, and on a day-to-day basis, I really love what I do. A little bit unlike Sylvia, I am very faced with the October 15th and April 15th deadlines, but I'll take you a little bit through what I do. Again, a similar situation to Sylvia. I started out, I'm in my late 40s, I started out way back when, and I started out with a firm named, when I was at Pace, I started out with Deloitte, Haskins & Sells. As I was in college, they combined with Deloitte and Touche, and I started to do some work in the sports and special event areas, mostly on individuals' income tax. And that's where I started out. I had my own firm with a partner probably for about, I got out of school in '86 for about 6 years. I worked for Deloitte. Was out on my own with a partner for about 8 years. And we sold it off to a Canadian company and done a bunch of different things over the years. But I got started way back when in accounting. There's now, as the slide says, there was over 1.3 million accounting and audited jobs in the profession. There's a lot of new jobs. The regulations are constantly changing. It is very difficult to keep up with everything that's going on, but I was able to, at the beginning, and I would advise this to a lot of to students, whether it's a graduate level or not, to try to get a good general background at the beginning to learn. Very, very important, and I know Jeff and Lisa and everybody's pushing this to try to get the exam out of the way once you came out of school, to try to take the time. It's freshest in your mind when you come out of school to try to get that done. And then, decide if you want to be on the tax side or the auditing side. But I chose the tax side, and I was always a big sports fan, never really good enough to play. Pace was not a big sports program college, but a very good accounting school. And, I got started in the sports area. And people say, well, Robert, what do you do? What do you do on a daily basis in the sports area? Well, one of the things that I talk a lot about is, idiosyncrasies that go on in the sports world. The NBA started their season last night. Kobe Bryant makes $339,000 a day during the regular season of the NBA season. That's $339,000 a day he makes, okay? The President of the United States, the election is next week, God willing. The President on an app makes $400,000. So when you put that out on Twitter, which I'll get into in a little bit time, people generally react very unusual to it, react to it in a big, big way. But on a daily basis, what I do really focuses on the needs of the high net worth individuals in the industries, such as the sports area, the entertainment area, and maybe some models. And a lot of times, people say, okay, well, what do you do for these people? Sometimes we provide tax services, including there's a lot of questions on multi-state, which I'll get into, and Sylvia touched on multi-state taxation before. We also talk about cross-border transactions, wealth planning, and all different things, because as we know in the sports world, I don't know how many of the young people saw the show Broke a couple of weeks ago, which really focused on athletes making money. But I always say it's not really what you make, it's really what you save. And your ability to take your money and put it away and save it for what I call a rainy day, that's very, very important. And unfortunately, a lot of these athletes don't really do that on a day-to-day basis, and they tend to spend more than they make, and the money really runs dry. I don't know if how many of the students, obviously, some might be sports fans. One of the things referred to is the NFL. What does that stand for? And the logical answer is the National Football League, but I often tell my guys it really stands for NFL, as in not for long, as in the athletes really can't take the pounding on their bodies and all that goes into being a professional football player. So we try to plan for a rainy day. What else do we do? For a lot of clients, probably about 10 to 15 clients, I pay their bills every day. So all their income comes to me. For the most part, we do not take power of attorney. We have the athletes sign off on the checks, and we send them permission to pay certain bills, and all the income comes to us as long as which bills we're going to pay out on a daily basis. So that's a lot of what we do. A lot of what I do is also regarding around, lately the IRS has really, really looked at auditing professional athletes, and you'll see that on the slide that's with a couple of sports teams. So what they're really looking at when they look at professional athletes, they're really looking at what we call the employee business expenses. By that I mean they're expenses that are unique to the profession of being a professional athlete, such as agent fees, such as union dues, and they're looking for documentation in the form of canceled checks, invoices, and payments out. So they're really focusing on that. I would say in the last 2 years, I've probably gone through about 25 or so of these exams, and mostly your goal as a CPA is to try to get the two favorite words that an accountant has when going through an audit, and those two words are no change, which basically means the tax return was accepted by filed after the exam and nothing was changed and no additional tax. People may say, well, Robert, tell a story about what happens with athletes. I picked up a rather large professional hockey player on the East Coast, and his prior accountant, his name was Mr. Layman, and he was really a layman when it comes to handling the notices. So what happened was his prior accountant got a notice and basically just disregarded it. So I didn't know about the notice yet. I went and filed his 2010 tax return, and I was due a large refund. When the refund was supposed to be received, the IRS, what I call, intercepted the refund, to use a sports term. They took away the refund because they believed they were owed money. So what I was able to do was to go back and deal with the exam for 2000, and I think it was 2008 or 9 or whatever it was, and get him, the desired no change. At the same time, he had some multi-state issues. And I said to the player, I said, look, you play for a local team in the East Coast. I said, you play against a bunch of New York teams, don't you? He said, of course I do, Robert. You know I do. And I said, well, why do you ask? He said, well, you haven't filed a New York return in 4 years. So we were able to go file a New York return for him and get back credit from the state of New Jersey for some of those years, and he didn't do some other things correct there, so we were able to get it back. And he got pretty scared when I had it mentioned to him. He said, was I going to go to jail? No, you're not going to go to jail currently, but we did help him through that. So that happens a lot. We also do a lot of this analysis, and I talk about this on Twitter all the time. I got into Twitter, I guess, about 15 months ago, and if you could turn to the next slide, please. What happened with me was, when I first started out in the late 40s, I'm not like you young people. I didn't really know what Twitter was, and somebody said, "Come on, Robert, only twits don't tweet." So I started out, and I started out a little slowly, but for the course of a year, to go to 7,600 followers has been incredible. And to give you a funny story, even the little things happen. Like, I think people are aware today we had some pretty bad weather in the East Coast and New Jersey for the last couple of days. I was in my vehicle waiting about an hour to get gasoline today. And I put out a tweet about, it's the most I've ever waited for gas. And, oh, by the way, I see 300 people carrying around their little red containers to get gas. And what I didn't know is somebody who's got about 2 million followers retweeted that. So I had people, I think every person from Louisiana, Florida mentioned to me that this happens all the time. So it's a small, different way to touch the world on things like that. But what we're also going to do at the end of this presentation, I think Lisa's going to be nice enough to forward you. One of the things that really, really got me started in Twitter was I had an interview on NPR. And if you Google sports taxman and NPR interview, it will come up. And basically what happened right around 4th of July, I was contacted by one of the writers from NPR. They came to my house, and they wanted to do a half-hour story about what I do, but not about what I do for professional athletes, more about what I do, meaning Robert Raiola, and what happened. So basically what happened, they said, okay, we'll be in touch with you in 2 weeks. Within 4 days, they said, okay, Robert, you're on 3 times the next morning. That day, I gained 800 followers. The first 10 minutes that was on the radio, the piece that was on me, I gained, in 10 minutes, 200 more people followed me. That day, our website, the firm's website, which is FMRTL's website, we gained the most traffic we've ever had. A month later, nobody knew as to why the traffic really spiked that day. It was really driven by this NPR interview. That has really, really helped me in terms of expanding my practice. I was contracted, again, solely through Twitter about a hockey agent in New York City. And just to take you guys through what happens, he contacted me. And then, you start to get to, okay, what forms of media you want to deal with. We DM'd through direct message through Twitter. Then we got to an email. And then we started to get to the old people way. We actually got on the phone. And then we actually saw each other in person, had lunch, and he hired me to do about 6 or 7 of his players. I was also in the Boston Globe. And because, an article talking about last year, about a year ago, about the NBA lockout. And then I would say on average, I'm probably on the radio 4 or 5 times, or maybe 3 times a week. On different radio stations. Unfortunately, none of the really, really big ones, but big in the West Coast and Denver and in Southern California. They've been on a couple local radio shows here. Just again talking about the whole concept of professional athletes going broke. I think it was 2 years ago that Sports Illustrated had an article about that in the first 2 years after they're done playing, maybe 75% of NFL players are broke, and within 5 years, maybe 70% of NBA players are broke, or numbers such as that. So I was supposed to speak this Friday, but the hurricane took care of that at New York Law School. I'm constantly out there. Sylvia was nice enough, or somebody was nice enough to mention LinkedIn. Please feel free. When I was your age, people helped me. I'm more than willing to help out any young students, especially if they're nice enough to reach out and just say I had a question, or Robert, how did you get into sports? I really love sports, and I basically the NPR pieces and the Twitter. Again, remember now, in the social media business to accounts. Some people get scared. I know Lisa's embracing it's done a tremendous stuff through iShade. Jeff's done a lot of stuff with College Frog, but it's really getting out there and not being afraid to take the chance. And I took the chance on Twitter, and now people come to me with questions all the time. And if you hear the NPR piece, you really hear what it's about. And people say to me, "Well, Robert, I'm a Yankee fan, and A-Rod makes a lot of money. What does he make a day?" Well, he makes almost as much as Jeff from College Frog makes. He makes $163,934 a day. Just kidding, Jeff, but I just wanted to make sure you were listening. But that's what I do. I really, as you can probably tell, I grew up in Brooklyn. I am passionate about what I do, and I'd be more than happy to help any of you guys if you reach out to with the different questions. But again, we do a lot of tax compliance. There's a lot of people say, "Well, Robert, how do they know when an athlete is out in California?" High profile, high salary, and with the advent of the internet, it's easy to track them. California and New York are the two states that really go after the athletes the most. There's still about 7 states, Wyoming, Nevada, Texas, state of Washington, that do not have an income tax. But, a long time ago I wrote a book, The Winning Tax Strategies for Athletes and Entertainers, and I'm working with a couple of the societies now to try to rewrite that. More than happy to help people whenever they have some questions, and I really thank Jeff and his team, Lisa, Sylvia, and everybody involved with this. Thank you for having me, Rita. Thank you for presenting, and I think we'll be around for a little bit to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Robert. Very, very interesting. And Sylvia, very interesting. We've had 2 great presenters here, and just a couple questions. We do have some time, so I'm going to ask some questions. And Jeff had one, I know, for you, Robert. What advice do you give to a student who wants to sort of specialize like you did in sports and entertainment? Somebody coming right out of school, where do they go first? What do they do first?
I think that they got to take care of that small thing called the exam. I would definitely take care of that first, get that out of the way. And generally, you're either going to probably decide to go into 2 basic sides of accounting. Would be, I would think, tax or audit. And you can, if you chose the tax side, get a good tax background. If you want to go into the area that I did, obviously it's more related to individuals, but I basically made sure that I knew as much as I could. And how did you learn about all the different states and all the different rules? I love what I do. So for me to put my head in a book and look into the state of Wisconsin and learn about the baseball case that talks about spring training and whatnot. And one other thing I'll talk about, and this is very, very interesting, I meant to talk about it before, again about A-Rod. Well, what's going to be the hot thing in the offseason? The Yankees going to keep him or not? I'll tell you what the hot thing is in baseball, he's what's called a 5 and 10 guy. He's been with the Yankees for 5 years, and he's been in Major League Baseball for 10. So he cannot be traded without his permission. How may he be convinced to be traded? Well, simple. Right now, he's a resident of Florida, but he plays in New York. So he's paying tax in New York on about 45% of his income. If he is traded to Florida, okay, and the Yankees and Florida work out a deal where the Florida will pay some of the salary, the Yankees will pay it most. The way it works in baseball is all the money would be paid by the Marlins and then reimbursed to the Marlins by the Yankees. That would be a tremendous advantage to A-Rod because none of that 45% would be taxed in New York except the 9 games that the Marlins play against the Mets. However, there is a new tax court memorandum from 2010. If the Yankees paid him directly, even though he performed no services in New York, they look back at the average of the last 3 years. I just learned this last week, and we'll probably be coming out with a blog about this. He would be taxed just the same as if he was playing for the Yankees, even if he wasn't anymore. So I think that's going to get a lot of publicity, and I'm just learning, and thanks to Rita, going to be associated with iShade and trying to blog and do a little bit on their side as well. But again, get the general background, sort of a long-winded answer. Get the general background. Don't ever give up your interest if you have a desire to do a specific niche like Sylvia does or like I do. Keep that fever going.
Robert, one other, I wanted to ask you if you would tell the Steve Nash story. I think the students would find that interesting.
Yeah, that was again, that was something that is in the NPR interview. And again, for those most of the young people really know how to. If you Google sports taxman and NPR, I'm sure it will come up. I think it was in July, maybe July 10th, what it was. But basically, what happened, the public came out and said that isn't it a great story? The prodigal son, Steve Nash, who happens to those don't know is Canadian. He's going to go back and play for the Raptors. I said hogwash. There's no way his family. He was separated from his wife, but his family from Arizona, so coincidentally where he ultimately wound up, California, is not far. And just so people know, Canada has provincial tax and I guess a federal tax. In the province of Ontario, this year the top rate is 48%, and next year it's 49.5%. Except Nash was Canadian, so he would pay that rate on all of his income. So basically, what I figured out and I tweeted out was that the Knicks offer of 3 years, I think it was like 24 million was after tax was more than the Raptors offer 3 years 30 million, or those particular something like that. So I thought that was all really not true as that he was going to go back there, but I thought it was very interesting, something to put out. But you know what the media says and what always is sometimes the two different things.
And Robert, one more thing, the people that support you in the firm, do you have young people working that you're supervising, doing research or helping you in any ways? What does your department look like?
Right. The firm is what I'd say what you would probably term a regional firm. We have offices in New Jersey. We do have, just so people know, because this is asked all the time, we do have a group that does financial planning and stocks and bonds and financial advisors. But I told the firm when I got here from the beginning that basically what I do is I try to stay truly independent. And even though the firm does a good job of doing that stuff, I don't have any of the people that are financial advisors that do business with or outside the firm to maintain what I call my independence. I've got a bunch of people, 4 or 5 people that work underneath me, with me on doing some of the bill paying, and I'm always looking to young people for better ways to do things, i.e., going out on social media. I've never tried Facebook, and getting to learn LinkedIn a little bit more, or trying to get involved in going to campuses and talking to young people. So there's always an opportunity. What I love about people, I can always teach them how to do a tax return. I can always teach them how to do a bill pay. I can't teach them attitude. If somebody's got a hard-working attitude and is not looking at their watch at 5 o'clock, if they got to work a little after 5 o'clock, well, so be it. I can always teach them the particulars about doing a 1040 or multi-state tax return, but give me the hard-working kid anytime, that's what I'd love to have.
Great, great. And Sylvia, I have a couple questions for you. If you can unmute your mic. Okay, great. Sylvia, how do you get new clients? How do you attract them to your? Where do they come from for your?
Okay. Well, talking about social media, I within the last couple of years have really embraced social media. I am a huge fan of LinkedIn. I think if you're not on LinkedIn, I mean, that's like, you've got to be on LinkedIn. It's an incredible tool for making the right type of connections with potential clients, other professionals that can refer work to you. I've also recently, just within the last year, become an adopter of Twitter, and I love Twitter. And so one way that I have actually had clients come my way is through the connections I have made on social media, connections on Twitter, connections on LinkedIn. And it's not just direct clients, it's connections that I've made with other state and local tax and other tax consultants in other parts of the country that don't necessarily maybe focus on the areas that I focus on. So one of the things that I do is I do a lot with partnering with other firms, alliancing with other firms. Recently, within the last couple of months, within the last month, I guess this month, should I say? Let me start over. October the 1st, my firm became a member of the BDO Alliance. So now I am a member firm within the BDO Alliance. If you're familiar with the BDO Alliance, it is a incredibly wonderful network of regional CPA firms and tax specialty firms like my own firm that work together to service one another. So that's just another avenue for me to develop business. Of course, clients that I've been working with over the years, as I've moved from firm to firm, very often, clients will come with you, they'll follow you. You're the reason why they were, working with that particular firm. So it's not unusual for somebody to move from one firm to another firm and eventually have a lot of those clients move over with them. So that's just a couple of different ways, but I really got to tout the whole social media thing because LinkedIn and Twitter have been an incredible source of clients for me this past year.
And Sylvia, I think that is so important because the young people listening to this webinar definitely have an advantage because they're so good at it already. And those of us that have been in the profession for many years, we've had to learn something brand new and different and change our style where it's such a natural part of their life. I think they're going to have a big advantage coming into the accounting profession.
Yes, and that is definitely one of the advantages that the younger folks have, is that they're already, they grew up using these tools. Some of us older folks really kind of have to learn about them a little later in our careers, but they're already establishing these relationships early on that are going to move with them as they advance in their careers, as they move into leadership type positions within their firms or within their companies. And they've got this connection that they're building already today that's just going to benefit them that much more in the long run.
Another question I have for you, Sylvia, you're very specialized, so maybe you could talk a little bit about CPE, continuing professional education for the students, because when they become CPAs, they're required to get their CPE every year. Being so specialized, where do you find CPE and what type of CPE is of value to you when you become very specialized like you are?
Well, that's an excellent question because there is certainly no lack of wonderful CP courses out there. But as you just mentioned, when you get to both my level and with you're very specialized, I focus on a very specific area of taxation, state and local tax and employment tax. So I really need to my CPE, in order for it to really benefit me, really needs to be focused on those types of areas. Wonderful way to get really top level CPE is to look at some of the organizations that exist out there, like the Institute for Professionals in Taxation. There's some wonderful, very technical state and local tax conferences that occur across the United States. And once again, you start establishing those relationships, joining some of these organizations, you start to learn about these, again, very technical type courses that are made available to you. Another thing is, I happened to mention a little while ago that I do quite a bit of writing. I've been published numerous times in some of the different journals. Texas will give you a certain amount of hours, CPE hours, for items that you author, and I can't remember the specific number. So in other words, what I'm saying is that every year, for example, when I turn in my professional education information to the state of Texas and renew my license, I'm able to list on there that I've written certain articles and presented on certain webinars, and those actually, some of those hours are actually applied as continuing professional education hours. So, in doing what I'm doing, writing, having an article published, learning about a particular topic, I'm able to also obtain some CPE hours that way.
Very good. Interesting. One final question for you, Sylvia. Robert mentioned that he sort of got into sports and entertainment right from immediately when he began his career. It was pretty early on. How did you evolve or get interested in state and local?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of a similar situation. When I first started working, and I mentioned a little while ago, I was with the Big Eight, those firms from way back when. I've always loved to write, and I've always loved research and writing, and that it just seems to come very naturally to me. And it's been funny. I remember when I interned, my first internship that I did was for Ernst & Winnie in San Antonio, Texas, and back in the 1980s. And most of the interns, they came in and they're doing some tax return work and so on and so forth. And somebody asked me to do some research and writing, and they liked what I did. And I spent the whole summer researching and writing on tax issues related to the King Ranch, which is this big big ranch in Texas. Okay, and I knew that that was my bent. I knew that that was my knack. So I knew kind of staying focused on tax. Where I was able to utilize that skill was something that I tried to do. I tried to find advocates, within my career that would help me continue to do that type of work. Staying local, this is a very good question. I always, pretty much right from the start, I was really, a corporate tax person. So I mentioned a minute ago, I interned with Ernst and Whinney. That was during my years as a graduate student at UT Austin. Then when I actually started working, I started working for Arthur Young in their tax department in Dallas, Texas. And right from the start, I, just went into the corporate side. I was never, ever really on the personal income tax side. So I've never really did much in the area of 1040 work. Even when I was in public accounting, I was always just sort of a corporate person. And back in the late 1980s, 1990s, state and local tax, at one point really wasn't something that companies gave that much thought to. And this is when there was a lot of stuff starting to develop. As a matter of fact, there's this key court case that everybody's talking about these days, and it's called the Quill Corporation case, and it has to do with basically the last time the Supreme Court addressed this sales tax nexus physical presence issue. That court case was decided back in 1992. And I remember being a young person working in state and local tax when this very relevant Supreme Court case that we still talk about today was being decided. And I mentioned a minute ago, I was with Arthur Young, really kind of focused on the corporate side. Then I moved into industry. I talked about my work in industry. And when I moved into industry, one of the things I moved into was not just doing the federal corporate work, but doing the state corporate work. So pretty early on in my career, I just sort of kind of ended up on the corporate side, never really worked on the personal income tax side. Moved into industry. The companies that I worked for happened to be companies that were doing business all over the United States at a point in time when state and local tax was really taking off. And really that's pretty much how I got my start, and I've been focused on this area for a very, very long time.
Very good. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you. And thank you, Robert. Personally, I've enjoyed listening to both of your stories. It's been very interesting and beneficial to me, and I'm sure the students feel the same way. I want to thank Jeff with College Frog and Lisa with iShade for involving me in this session. Very eye-opening, very interesting. I hope the students will follow up and check out the websites of these two people and follow their Twitter accounts and see what you can learn about different ways you can really get involved in the accounting profession and have a unique career and a wonderful career down the road. And Lisa, I think I'll turn it over to you now.
I am back. Rita, thank you so much for moderating this session with us. We really appreciate your input, and you had great questions as usual. I want to thank all the participants for being here and staying with us. It's amazing how many people have stayed online through the bitter end. And I just wanted to give you reminders for the rest of National Meet the Firms Week. We have a couple more webinars coming up. Tomorrow is the CPA exam, which the registration for that one is unbelievable right now. That's going to be presented by Becker. And then on Friday, using social media to build your personal brand. So we've had some great examples of people who have done that with Robert and Sylvia today. And now we're going to have somebody to help us figure out how to do it for ourselves individually. Again, I want to make sure that everyone has registered for National Meet the Firms Week, got their profile set up on College Frog. And because like Jeff said, your profile, your resume, all of your information is going to be distributed to all of the firms that are participating. So we want to make sure that you are registered, you're updated, and you have all of your current information out there. Okay. And of course, make sure that you're registered for iShade.com. So thank you all once again. And that concludes our session for today.